Coming up, State Senator Chloe Maxmin on the Maine Challenge. Hi, and welcome to Maine Challenge. This week, I am thrilled to have as our guest newly elected State Senator Chloe Maxmin. Chloe was a House rep for 2 years and just ran and won a very difficult race in Lincoln County. And I am thrilled to have you with us, Chloe. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so excited for your for your service as a state senator. You know, I was thinking about the first time I met you. And it was a couple of years ago when I was running for governor, actually, and when you were running for your House seat. And we were at a Lincoln County Democratic meeting and in a little room with a lot of people pre-COVID. And you got up and spoke. And I remember sitting in my chair saying, wow, okay. Now I feel hopeful about what we might be able to do as Democrats and as citizens and people in Maine. So and let me just say that your first term as a House rep, you did such amazing work. So thank you so much for being here and congratulations.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Betsy. Your work has been so inspiring. You're just exactly what we need in politics. And I've just been so grateful to watch you run and learn from you.
Oh, well, awesome. So Chloe, so you ran an incredible race, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and how you did it. But it was also a race that was a lot of people predicted when you decided to run, like, why is she doing that? It's such a hard race. She'll never win. But the thing that I have been I love so much about you, one of the many things I love so much about you, is that you from the very beginning in your House race, and then especially in the Senate race, said that you were going to run differently, that you were going to run in a way that included people, that was not partisan, didn't really care about party, but really met the needs of your constituents. Talk a little bit, if you would, about what inspired you to do that, why you wanted to do it differently, and what that different kind of looked like.
Yeah, I think it's been such a long journey, and I'm honestly still dissecting, what we actually did and what worked and what resonated with folks. But I've been doing political work for such a long time, mostly as a constituent on the outside of the system, trying to get some kind of good legislation passed for the people. And I felt so hopeless for so long. And it, eventually dawned on me that I wasn't really angry at corporations and I wasn't really angry at voters. I was angry at the people that we elected. And I was also really angry at the way that they ran their campaigns. So I started to work on different campaigns and I just didn't have really good experiences. I felt like really used. It wasn't fun. I felt like my volunteer capacity was taken advantage of. And I was just talking to people who had their door knocked on 3 times already and talked to 5 people out of a 3-hour shift. I mean, the whole situation was so disempowering. And I've also, in my adult voting life, only had one person ever knock on my door in rural Maine.
Oh, wow.
So in 2018, I decided to run for office, and there were kind of a few things that led me to realize that, one, local politics has been so overlooked by the Democratic Party and really politics in general. We don't pay a lot of attention to it. We don't put a lot of money into it. And the second is that rural communities like ours are almost entirely left out of the campaigning season. You don't get as much bang for your buck if you're campaigning in a rural place. So let's not even go there. And that's a pattern that we see all across the country. So my community has been left out of the political conversation. Our voices are not reflected accurately in political spaces these days. Mm-hmm. So when we started to run, the campaign was kind of the heart of it. It was the heart of how we started to talk about a different type of politics. And when we said we were doing it differently, there are so many things that we did differently. I mean, and I think the biggest uniting theme is that we didn't rely on the Democratic Party to do any of our core work for us. So they're usually consultants that design your mailers, and the party helps you create your universe so that you know who you're going to talk to when you go out to knock on doors. And we did all of that ourselves to just really give ourselves the space to think about how politics could really reach so many people. And it's because of the power of the campaign that we decided to run for state senate as well. The opportunity to do that work on a slightly larger scale was so exciting to me. I mean, there's no other opportunity where you can talk to so many people, thousands of people, and get their input to really build a campaign around them. That's what happens during a campaign season. And that's why we ran for state senate.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And one of the things that I hear you saying that is so important is that so many people feel like they're just not heard, like that they don't matter. Their lives don't matter. And I think it's really true in rural parts of this state and the country. But I think it's all over. People say, you know what? They don't, those politicians, they don't care about they don't care about me. And so I think that now this year was very unique because the first thing that happened right after you announced was COVID, right? And I know you mobilized thousands of volunteers and or made thousands of calls to just check in on people. And I think that, to me, one of the things I've always said and is how we run is how we will govern. And so it was such a caring act, and it was so real, to sort of say, okay, are you okay? So, but it's also unique. It doesn't happen every election cycle. So talk a little bit about what that was like and what you learned from that and the number of volunteers that came out and that kind of thing, because that was really different.
So we had already launched our campaign before COVID hit. We had this beautiful potluck at the North Noblesboro Community Center with about 100 folks. We had a really large list of volunteers who we knew were going to help us. And when you're a candidate, you also get access to a voter database. So you have everybody's phone number. And that's a privilege, that's a type of access that we take very seriously in our campaign. So with all of those factors combined, when COVID hit, we didn't want to campaign. It was not right. But we wanted to use the infrastructure that we had built and our network to help people. So we started to make phone calls to seniors in Jefferson the first day that we did it. And we found multiple folks who needed someone to check in on them. We found somebody who was running out of food. And so then we decided to expand this program beyond the town of Jefferson. We connected with local resources to make sure that they knew what we were doing. And we just started to make phone calls. We ended up recruiting about 200 volunteers to join our COVID relief aid. We called every single senior in Senate District 13 and made over 13,500 phone calls. We helped hundreds of folks. I mean, the range of things that people needed back in March and April when the support systems that we have now weren't there. I mean, food, people needed rides to go pick up their prescriptions. People needed rides to the doctor. All the transportation services had shut down. And so we ended up coordinating this transportation network, which I'm still doing to this day and all throughout the summer. When people have needed rides to the doctor, I have trusted drivers that go pick them up and bring them. And we had one woman who would always go to the library to get large print books because she was going blind and she couldn't go to the library anymore. So we kind of went through our network and had folks who own local bookstores go find books for her and bring them to her house. And we had somebody else who didn't have access to the news. So one of our volunteers purchased them a subscription to the New York Times, and just this incredible support network. And it showed us that politics can and should be a public service. And, I just, even though my name is on all this stuff, I just so deeply don't see a campaign as about me. It's about our community. And, putting someone's name on a sign is just a vessel to do good work. And we really, to us, politics is about helping everybody, regardless of party, age, background. And that's what we put to work with COVID.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, one of the things that was so impressive, I mean, that totally shifts the narrative about politicians. Because the narrative is they're just in it for themselves. They're not interested in helping people. All they want is the glory, although I'm sure many politicians argue there's not much glory there now. But, and so I think to actually show people, it's like, don't listen to my words. That's another thing. People, talk is cheap, especially during campaign season. But to actually have someone doing the work and doing it as they're campaigning, I think is so very powerful. So what else would you say was really different about your campaign? Like what did you do and what didn't you do that you think is unique to how campaigns are typically run?
I think the biggest thing that we do differently is we talk to everybody, and we make a tremendous effort to reach out to folks in a really meaningful way. I think a lot of campaigns look at people as numbers, as votes, that you're trying to tally and make sure you get enough people to win. And for us, we look at people as relationships. And so we so it's kind of like a technical thing, but when you go and knock on doors, you don't talk to every single person, because there's some people out there who are definitely not going to vote for you, and there are people out there who are going to vote for you no matter what. So we try and be a little bit strategic about it. And in a lot of Democratic campaigns, what happens is you go talk to people who are Democrats, or like who are pretty likely to vote for you already, and so you don't talk to folks who have different viewpoints, or who might agree with you on a couple things but disagree with you on most things. And so what we did is we created our own system for who we were going to talk to. And that meant that every day I was talking to people in our community who had never been contacted by a Democratic campaign in their entire voting history. And that's shocking. That's really sad to me, because everyone that I talk to has real struggles. We're living through such a tough time, and politics is impacting all of our lives in the most profound ways. And so what we just reached beyond, we went and had, I knocked on over 13,300 doors this year to really try and connect with people and make sure that their voices were what was guiding our campaign. And I think a consequence of that is that our campaign was not just made up of folks who had the same values as Democrats. Our campaign was made up of the people of District 13, really focused on our values as a community of trying to care for each other and respect where other people are coming from. And that was really special. I say it, and I genuinely mean it, that I really could care less about party right now. I think it's really divisive and really destructive. And I want to fight for everybody in my community. And I can't do that unless I go and talk to everybody.
Yeah. So, and that's so important. I think it's so important. And I think the divide is no longer party and party. I see it much more up and down. But I think one of the things that I think people would be helpful. So lots of people watching this, lots of people in your campaign and other campaigns do the door-to-door, do literature drops. And I know that my kids, I do it, and my kids did it this session. And one of the things that was this campaign season, one of the things that was really hard is what do you do when when you meet someone who is like, there's so much rancor and hatred of politicians and politics, which is very understandable. But what do you do? How did you deal with someone when they were like, or they were openly hostile, or they were like, I hate government, I hate you, I hate whatever. How did you pivot? Because I know you persuaded a lot of those people.
Yeah. Lots of anger out there this year. It was shocking. In 2018, I felt like things were kind of divisive and angry, but this year was a whole new level. And it was freaky because I felt like the community that raised me, which I think of as a very kind, caring community, did not feel super kind and caring this year, but for understandable reasons, because politics has so failed everyone, and I think everyone has a right to be angry at it. But I mean, different levels of anger. Definitely the folks who shut the door in your face and tell you to get off their property, and there's really not much that you can do there except say that's not very kind and walk away. But a lot of times what I try and do is just like stay pretty calm and just say, do you have any space to talk about this with me? Or, you don't know me yet. I know you see me as someone who represents the system that has failed you, but I'm genuinely here to try and make it better. And I want to hear what you have to say, whether or not you vote for me. And a lot of times kind of trying to break it down and be a little bit more honest really helps. I remember this one time when I drove down someone's really long dirt driveway, and they came at me hard, and I was like, whoa, I'm not here to be angry at you. I'm here to listen to you. And he was like, I'm so sorry. And he ended up apologizing and was like, I'm really sorry. I hate the campaign season. I hate all these people coming down my driveway. I just feel like they're using me, and I shouldn't have come at you like that. So I think sometimes it can like break it down a little bit, but
well, and I think, and I think that sense of that you actually are there to care about them, but you have to get over that hurdle because they've been so trained and so experienced in, people who don't like, as people who, as canvassers, you're told you've got 40 seconds to be at this door because you've got to get to the next door. And so that's not real. That's not like, are you going to vote? Okay, great, bye. It's not the kind of conversation. So I want to ask you, do you think that this is, first of all, scalable to other districts in the state? And what about like statewide campaigns where the candidate themselves can't actually knock on every door? Like, how do you think this is translatable? Because let me just stop there.
Yeah, I do. And I think the fact that, we translated it from our House district into a Senate district that was 6 times bigger and arguably harder in some ways, like mostly harder. But anyways, so I do think it's scalable. I think Maine is pretty unique because our House and Senate districts compared to the rest of the nation are pretty small. So it's easy for a candidate to try and make a couple passes of a universe and really talk to people in a meaningful way. But I think that regardless, there are some key lessons and takeaways that are definitely that can be translated to other places and spaces. And I think with statewide campaigns, that's something that I get really excited thinking about and just kind of watching what happened this year with the Senate race and just seeing how it did end up reinforcing some of the dynamics, the Gideon Collins race that we were fighting against in District 13. And you were doing it in such a different way. And
yeah. So what do you think? What do you think some of those differences are? What, like, if you were going to say, okay, here's some things you ought to take away, next candidate or Democratic Party or any Republican Party, anybody, what are some of the things that you would say are like absolutely key?
I think if we're talking about statewide campaign or whatever, I think going to rural places is key. I think that it's like, for obvious reasons, it's a lot easier to campaign in a city because voter turnout is a lot easier. Reaching voters is a lot easier. You can knock 100 doors in 2 hours instead of it taking 6 or 7 hours. So, there's some obvious reasons why there's that focus, but then it leaves behind a vast swath of folks in the most rural state in the country. And that's not okay. That's not a good political model. I think the other must is that we talk to Republicans, we talk to independents. There are folks who voted for Trump and who voted for me. I don't care. What I care about is that we are talking about politics in a different way that is based in mutual respect and understanding. And I don't, the campaigns that I see are so divisive and pitting people against each other that there's not even that space to have people from different parties talk to each other. And I think another must is a commitment to positive campaigning. Every single person I talked to this year was so fed up with the negative politicking, as they should be. I was too. And so we really committed to doing it differently. And I think those things are simple, but they create a culture of respect and understanding. And it also means that we're not just like running the campaigns with the same people in the same way year after year after year. We are genuinely reaching out to folks who have been left behind and saying that your voices need to be the ones guiding how this works.
Yeah. Okay. So I agree with you 100%, of course. And it seems so obvious, right? None of us talked to a single person who didn't say, oh my God, the commercial, oh, get it off. I can't stand, like, everyone. So what do you think it will take for the mainstream Democratic, and not just Democratic, the Republicans do it too, but the mainstream parties, the national parties, they lost every Senate, Chuck Schumer lost every Senate race that he got involved in the primary, except for Colorado. And, in the House in Maine, we lost a number of seats. And it seems like if this wasn't the time, the pandemic and the worst economic thing, and, it seems like this would have been a time that we should have done huge wins. And yet it seems like we just keep going back to the same old playbook. What do you think it'll take for the playbook to change, not just with a couple of candidates, with you and some other people, and but will actually change the the system and say, okay, no, we can't do it this way anymore. We need to make this more real if we're going to get people's respect and have government actually serve people. What do you think that will take?
I think it's going to take a lot of things. I think it takes candidates themselves pushing back and being like, I'm not going to do it this way. Candidates
do, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
candidates get a lot of support from the party, which is needed. Like, it's part of how it's accessible for people to run. And so, and parties, at least in Maine, the state Democratic Party is helping hundreds of people run for office, and that's an awesome thing. But there also needs to be space for rural communities to run their campaigns differently than what happens in Portland or Brunswick. And so I think some of that's the candidates bringing kind of a different mindset to it. And I think a lot of it is just also kind of what the parties themselves look like and the kind of conversations that are guiding those values. And yeah, it's hard to be too harsh because everyone's just trying to do good work on both sides. Everyone's doing what they think is right. But I think the parties, Republicans and Democrats, are leaving people behind on both sides. And there's a whole lot of folks in the middle who we were talking to this year who just like, I don't belong anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're going to find it when we have automatic voter registration that starts in January. I think we're going to see the vast majority of those people register as unenrolled because they don't feel loyal to a party. They don't feel like one of the parties represents them or either party represents them. So I think maybe that'll be a little bit of a wake up call too. I'm hoping that that's where we're going to see. And I know that you are working on open primaries so that people can then feel engaged. They don't have to be part of a party structure to be engaged in the full electoral process. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to pivot a little bit to the issues that you got at people's doors. And especially like, were there any ones that really surprised you or that really stuck out for you that you heard from lots of your constituents?
Yeah, I mean, since I started campaigning in 2018, I've been surprised because before I ran for office, kind of the tropes that I heard was, you're going to hear people talk about property taxes and healthcare and funding for education, and you're just going to hear people talk about that all the time. And I did hear people talk about that, no doubt. But what I noticed in 2018, and it was amplified this year, the top thing that I heard is that people feel just so fed up with government, so it's not even, it's like a level even higher than an issue is government itself has failed us, is letting us down. We're abandoned. We're not heard. The issues that we dealt with last year are the same issues we're dealing with this year, and it's even worse. So why am I even voting? And that it's that kind of system that we hear echoed back to us all the time. And this year, more than any issue, I heard the disgust around negative campaigning. So, so a lot of our work in our campaign is trying to respond to that and be like, okay, we're running a positive campaign. We're not going to do something that you don't like. Okay, I'm responsive. I'm here. I'm going to answer your emails. I'm going to work on issues for you. Let's talk about that. So like trying to directly respond to what people were saying. And, but of course, almost everyone I talk to is also struggling with healthcare access, broadband access this year, what schools look like, how teachers are getting paid, what resources there are for students. There are just so many burdens and struggles at the moment, and those come up too. But I was surprised that it's not those kind of so down that we have to go higher.
And that gives you another hurdle to get over. So you have to not only do the issue conversations, which I think there's probably not much of a hurdle, and we see that most people agree with what you stand for in healthcare and all that kind of thing, but you have to get over the hurdle of people believing that you or any politician will give a damn or do anything about it, and so that's like one hurdle. And then you can start talking about Green New Deal, and you can talk about agriculture and climate and all that, and healthcare and all the things that you've been an incredible champion of. So it really just has this whole system has just added a whole nother layer of, a burden, I think, to candidates, because you have to say, no, I really am different. And I think that's one of the shining, hopeful things that you bring to this whole thing is that, yes, we can do it differently, and we will do it differently. Because in my campaigning and even working, helping you and other candidates, people just want to know what we're for. It's like, okay, fine. You don't like the other person. Great. I got you there. But what are you going to do for me? And what are you going to do for me? How is it going to help my life tomorrow or the next day or the next day? And so when that doesn't happen, then you see all that negative campaigning on top of it. I think people are like, enough. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, I want to ask you a couple of questions about Chloe. So when things get hard, and they do, and then I know you have a lot of those days, or we all have a lot of those days, especially on the campaign trail. How do you inspire yourself? How do you keep yourself going? What picks you up?
Yeah. I mean, the genuine truth is that I love where I live so much. I love my home. My dog is whining in the background. I don't know. Sorry. I love Noblesboro. I love Maine. I love this place. I love the community that raised me, and I know what I'm fighting for. And that's what keeps me going. I come home after a hard day and I just go sit outside, or I'm with my family or my friends, and I feel so grounded in why I'm doing this work and how important it is to start building a different type of politics that there's nothing else that I could think of to do right now. I'm for a long time, I felt like my existence isn't really for me. It's like to make the world a better place. And so when we're living through one of the hardest times in human history, and we know that harder times are coming, whether it's with COVID recovery or with the climate crisis, what else would I do except this?
Yeah, that's awesome. That idea of making the world a better place is really and you do such an incredible job at it. So let me just ask, so there's not that many people that have blazed a trail in the way that you are in politics. So who do you look to for inspiration? Who are your mentors? Who do you say, oh yes, okay, this is doable, I can do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I look a lot to people like you, who are running races in different ways. And I think when you're running a race in a different way, it's just like a leap of faith into darkness or light, and you don't know what it is, and you don't know if it will work. And so I take a lot of hope that there's other folks doing the same thing, and like we're all kind of figuring it out together. And I think there's a quote from AOC who said, a lot of us have to try for a few of us to make it. And I think it takes a culture of campaigning differently to start a new type of politics. I look to a lot of people who are elected, who are doing it differently, and who are just really good people and breaking the stereotype of politicians being selfish people. There are really good people in our state house right now, like Troy Jackson, for example, who just fight for their people no matter what. And they do it without thinking about the next election. And I look to that. And I also just take a lot of inspiration from my family. My parents moved to Maine because they didn't want my brother and I to grow up in an urban community. And my dad started a farm, and, I kind of grew up with a family that taught me. And I was very lucky to just jump into what you love and figure it out from there.
Oh, well, that's awesome, Chloe. And unfortunately, we're out of time. But I just want to say that I know that you are that inspiration for so many people, so many young women, so many people who want to get involved, not just women, but people who want to get involved. So thank you. And your biggest fan, your dog. So thank you so much, Chloe, for joining us on the Maine Challenge. And thank you all for joining us. Next week, join us where we'll talk to activists in the climate movement, young people who are going to inspire us and talk us about how they're involved in the electoral system and what they think needs to change. So join us next week on Maine Challenge. And Chloe, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.